Welcome back. From the depths of despair to the embrace of a loving community, the horror inflicted in Pittsburgh this week shattered the lives of 11 families, the Jewish community in Pittsburgh, and the entire city. It was also a gut punch to American Jews across the country. Why is anti-Semitism on the rise? Who or what are fanning the flames? Yet through all the anger and the pain is the warm embrace of the larger community. An estimated 2,200 people turned out at the Sarasota Fairgrounds Monday night for a candlelight vigil. There were vigils like this across the state and the nation, and it wasn't just Jews. It was Christians, it was Muslims, Buddhists, Sikhs. They were grieving Americans. Joining us for more are Howard Tevlowitz, the CEO of the Jewish Federation of Sarasota Manatee, Sarasota Mayor Liz Alpert, and Frank Alcock, a political science professor at New College. And I welcome you all for what is an extremely tough week. And Howard, let me start with you, because what seems amazing to me, that on an almost spontaneous basis, 2,200 people from around our area gathered at the fairgrounds there. That's no small thing.
No, it was pretty amazing, actually. We came in on Saturday when the massacre took place. By Sunday, we had an idea of what we wanted to do. We sent a note out that we wanted to do it at the Federation campus. However, by Monday morning, by the time I came into work, we already had over 600 people had responded. By noon, it was 1,100, and when we cut it off by 3 o'clock, it was 1,700. And thank God for the city. They were amazing. They turned out, they enabled us to get to the fairgrounds and go.
And you went about it in a deliberate way. You had members of the clergy speak, but you didn't want the politicians.
It's a time to bring community together, and I think it's time for people, for spirituality and for comfort. It's not a time for speechifying, and we left it for the clergy, Jewish, Muslim, and Christian.
And we'll talk about that a little bit, but Liz, obviously what happened in Pittsburgh, frankly, could happen anywhere. It could happen here. You're the mayor of the city. I would imagine that your police department is also very aware of this. What have they said to you in terms of where they're at right now in terms of looking for warning signs?
Well, they've been proactive already. After the shooting in Charleston, they immediately got in touch with all of the religious leaders in the area and brought them together and started working on some solutions for how they can make sure they're safe. And they actually came up with a handbook to help all the congregations know what to do in case of a shooting situation, how to keep their houses of worship safe. And so they have been working on making sure things like that don't happen in our area. Now for this weekend, there's going to be a heightened police presence at the houses of worship.
And we're going to want to talk about that as well. Frank, should we have seen this coming? I mean, we keep on hearing reports about a rise in the anti-Semitism, and we'll get into this more, but I mean, is it simple enough to say our politics is involved with this, or
yes, we should have seen this coming. If we haven't, we should see it now. It's more than just anti-Semitism. It's part of our politics. Social media has a lot to do with the interaction of social media, politics, in our society. I don't know any other way than to characterize this. There are some dark forces that are out there. Some of them are external, outside of the country. Some of them are internal, and they'd like nothing better to tear our country apart. There are some other forces that are just being opportunistic and trying to either seize or hold on to power. But they are lighting fires, they are fanning flames, and they're doing what they can to neutralize the first responders in terms of our politics. And we better wake up and see what's going on, or things are going to get a lot worse.
Right, we have to take a quick break. Our conversation on anti-Semitism on the rise continues. Welcome back. We are talking about the rise of anti-Semitism after this week's Pittsburgh massacre, and joining us for more are Howard Tevlowitz, the CEO of the Jewish Federation of Sarasota Manatee, Sarasota Mayor Liz Alpert, and Frank Alcock, a political science professor at New College. And Liz, you started to tell us that Sarasota police are going to be out not only at synagogues around the community, but also other denominations. What's the thought process there?
Well, I think it's number one. I think there are going to be more people going to services, and I think there's a concern about a copycat wanting to do the same thing that they see usually when things show up in the news and these kinds of events happen. Somebody else gets the same idea. But, and I know Howard was going to mention this, the Jewish Federation is calling on more people to attend Shabbat services this weekend. And in fact, the U.S. Conference of Mayors also sent out a memo saying to mayors, you know, be sure to try to go to services this weekend to show solidarity.
Howard, I want to go back to the vigil earlier this week, because as we talked about, you wanted this to be the clergy's moment and you wanted to keep the politics out of it, but the clergy being the clergy will say whatever they want. And describe for us the points they tried to make that kind of put some of the politicians there on notice.
Well, I think this was more geared towards how people feel, how they felt. I mean, this is deeply personal. This is not something far away. This was there, and I think my rabbi, Rabbi Michael Warbaugh from Temple Beth Shalom in Sarasota, really talked to the heart of it. He lived there. So he's from there. He went to a funeral there yesterday. And this is deeply personal for us. So the rabbis, the Christian clergy, and the imam spoke from the heart. So this was not a time to talk about politics. There was a little bit of conversation talking to the elected officials that were there, but it was more about the need to bring this country together and not to divide it.
But we are divided and not quite all together right now. The vice president addressed the president's reaction and his visit to Pittsburgh yesterday. Let's take a look.
It's incredible to think that 11 lives were lost, 6 others injured, including law enforcement officials. As President Trump and I have made clear, what happened was not just criminal, it was evil, and we will never allow violence or anti-Semitism to take hold in the United States of America.
Obviously, those are strong words from the vice president, but the reaction to the president, Frank, in Pittsburgh yesterday was a little bit different.
It was. I think those words on the part of the vice president were better, I think, than the president. But it's more what he says before and after certain moments. I think in Pittsburgh, certainly the pain is there. I think people understand how rhetoric that might, on the margins, seem questionable but not necessarily hateful, certainly slips into hateful rhetoric, and it enables what we saw in Pittsburgh. So I don't think the entire community of Pittsburgh was ready for the president, but I think it's time to move away from finger pointing and blame at this point. At this point we know who the president is, we know what the president is. The president's behavior is not going to change, and so I think it's incumbent upon us to change our behavior, not really wait for a change in behavior.
We are just getting warmed up on this conversation. It will continue on the increase in anti-Semitism after a quick break. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone. We are talking about the rise of anti-Semitism after this week's Pittsburgh massacre, and joining us for more are Howard Tevlowitz, the CEO of the Jewish Federation of Sarasota and Manatee, Sarasota Mayor Liz Alpert, and Frank Alcock, a political science professor at New College. And Frank, you were saying that you're done in terms of expecting the right words out of this president right now. The question that some people are raising is whether he has dog whistles that are giving those who are anti-Semitic cause for being A, more vocal, and B, more active. The investigation into the Pittsburgh shooting will go on, but there's been talk about that suspect's dislike for a Jewish organization that helped immigrants.
Yeah, no, the dog whistles are there, and they're clear, and I'm not sure why the rest of society does not see them as clearly as I do. Where I'm having a hard time as I'm watching expecting the president to behave any differently than he's behaving. That will not happen. That will never happen. Getting the folks that are enabling and supporting him to change their behavior, I don't know how to crack that nut. It's a different question. But when it comes to the president, he is not going to lead us out of this situation. But it's just not going to happen.
It's not just the president. There are a lot of people who are, overt and less overt. There's been a lot of attention to the Republican Congressman Steve King,
yes,
who made a trip to Europe and basically was pretty out there with groups that have Nazi leanings. And today, the head of the Republican Congressional Action Committee basically cut him loose.
Right.
And this is a little bit of what Steve King had to say.
I'm not deleting that, because then you all pile on me and say King had to apologize, he was wrong, he knows he's guilty. I'm not. I don't feel guilty one bit. I'm human.
Okay, he's human. This is something his own party is coming down on him.
That's right. When his own party cuts him loose and comes down on him, that's what I want to see more of. That's calling him out as we've called him out, but it's taken a couple of weeks for them to respond. So I'm very happy with the development that we've had today. It's just different than my point. When Trump sucks up the oxygen and the news cycle, and then you're not seeing the reaction that you want to get, and he actually is able to use some of these things to his advantage. I don't want to get caught in that trap anymore. I'm done with that.
And Howard, your point is that there are problems, yes, on the right, maybe from the president himself, but you take issue with the left and anti-Semitism, whether it's on college campuses or elsewhere.
Yeah, this has been a problem. I've been here in Sarasota for almost 19 years. I've watched this problem for 19 years around the country. We're very attuned to this. Just a few months ago, Aretha Franklin had a funeral. Look at the podium. Look to the left of the podium. Louis Farrakhan was sitting there with a former president of the United States. A few weeks ago, Bill Clinton. Louis Farrakhan called Jews termites a few weeks ago and used words worse than that. So this issue has been going on college campuses for years. There's a new term called intersectionality. The new love of this is a woman called Linda Sarsour, who is referring to Jews in all kinds of negative ways. And this nexus between Israel and Jewish is completely blurred.
All right, I want to just point out to our viewers that the president right now is coming out onto the stage in Fort Myers. He's in Florida to campaign for Ron DeSantis, the Republican. I think we have some video of the president coming to the podium now. If he says anything on this issue, on the tragedy this week in Pittsburgh, or anything else along those lines, we'll bring that to you by the end of the broadcast. Liz, you meet and talk to so many people in this community from all different faiths and denominations, but you have also seen over time, we have had a number of anti-Semitic incidents at local synagogues and so forth. Have you seen this happen, at least in our community, on a more frequent basis?
I haven't seen it personally or with people that I've talked to, and again, Howard probably has a better read on that, but we really haven't. We have, in our community in 2003, we adopted an anti-discrimination ordinance, and we were, very progressive in doing that, which calls for freedom from discrimination based on age, color, disability, gender, marital status, national origin, race, religion, sexual orientation, and veteran status. So we're one of the few communities that have this human rights ordinance. And so I think overall, our community is pretty together.
You know what my thought was when hearing about the shooting in the aftermath in Pittsburgh, Frank, is that the police rushed in. They rushed in en masse, and so did the first responders. And they weren't rushing in because it was Jews who were being fired upon. They rushed in because it was not only their job, it was not only their shift, but that's what Americans do.
Yes.
And the question is, that uniquely American act, when we have a situation, whether it's anti-Semitism or bigotry or racism in general, how come there is not a larger public, more unified confrontation of it?
That's a great question. I wish we can spend more time and more moments seeing each other as human beings and appreciating everything that we have in common with us, with one another. But that just seems to be slipping away more and more. And as I said at the outset, I think that it's intentional. I think there are a number of forces, both internal and external, that are deliberately trying to get us to tear
We're going
one
to take a quick pause there because the president right now in Fort Myers is talking about the shooting. Let's listen in.
Evil anti-Semitic attack. Yesterday I traveled to Pittsburgh to meet with the families and first responders. And I especially want to thank Rabbi Jeffrey Myers. He was terrific. He was terrific. Fine man. We grieve for the families of the fallen, and we send our eternal gratitude to the law enforcement officers who sustained severe injuries taking down the gunmen. They were incredible. They were incredible. They were incredible. Could have been as bad as it was, and it was bad. It could have been far worse. They were unbelievable, and they got there fast. We pledge our resolve to remove the vile poison of anti-Semitism and so many other problems from our world, and we reaffirm...
The president speaking about the very issue that we are talking about tonight. But Howard, how do you put that next to some of the other comments that the president has made recently about globalists, about nationalism, which has connotations that are very, very bad during history? There are commercials out there that single out the head of the Fed and other people who are in power who just happen to be Jewish. And there's suspicions that there is some dog whistles there.
Look, it's hard for me because we don't deal in politics. Obviously, this is concerning. It wasn't just the president, it's other people in Congress who were talking about 3 people with a Jewish background. You know, you get into issues, the elders of the protocols of Zion. I mean, there's all kinds of issues we're dealing with here. Anyway, with Frank, you know, we have to move the dialogue, and I think moving the dialogue starts at home. This is an amazing community. I've never worked in a place like this where we work with faith leaders. We work at a different level. And you asked in the beginning why we were able to turn people out, because we have these relationships. We talk to each other. We know each other. It's kind of hard to hate someone you don't know,
Right.
well, you know. And this is part of the challenge.
Right. Liz?
I think that's the key to get over this and get through this. Is it is going to be on the people to come together, create community, get to know their neighbors, and get to know people that don't look or act or worship like them.
We need more of that in our community, but
Absolutely.
too often they were kind of going to our own sides, our own teams, and so forth. We have to take a quick break. We'll be back for final thoughts in a moment, so stay with us. And our guest joining us right now for final thoughts. And Frank, I'll start with you because we just saw a moment ago wonderful words from the President of the United States talking about anti-Semitism. And then we come back to our conversation, and if the President went on, he started talking about the fake news media as the enemy of the people because they reported there was opposition to his visit in Pittsburgh by some people in the congregation and members of that community, and that, you know, no public officials wanted to really be there with him. And isn't that kind of part of the problem, that we look to our leaders to soothe the nation in times like this, and that's good, but then we get that.
Right, and I don't think you're going to get anything different than that. And that's what I mean by throwing firecrackers and fanning flames. But I think we have to, I don't think that we can wait from leadership from above in these moments. I still continue to believe that for the vast majority of us, there's far more good within us than there is bad and evil. And we just have to summon that good stuff and understand what a critical time we're having in this country, and be able to react, see each other as humans, respect one another, be sane and not crazy. And we're not going to agree on everything, but at least we need to be able to disagree in a civil way. We're not able to do that anymore.
And Liz, what role do public officials like you have to help that along?
Well, I think Frank sort of hit on it. I think public officials need to be setting the example for everyone and bringing people together and doing the things that create that, not creating a division.
And Howard, you get the final word, and the question to you is, what should the Jewish community do? Aside from calling it out on all sides, what do we need to do that we are not doing yet?
Well, I think we need to continue to develop relationships in the community. We need to rely on our faith, but we also need to rely on other faiths to stand up with us and stand up against this kind of behavior. I will throw out a little bit of a plug that the American Jewish Committee and the Federation are encouraging everybody this weekend on Friday night and Saturday to come to synagogues. Jews and non-Jews alike, come out, and that's a display of putting boots right on the ground. But what we have to do is just be aware and speak out against it. There's just nothing to push this under the carpet anymore. We have to speak forcefully, but I agree with Frank, what we don't want to do is just raise this temperature all the time where it's a burning house constantly and we're really screaming at each other. It's just going to get nowhere.
All right. Thank you all for being here tonight. We want to thank our guest, Howard Tevlowitz, the CEO of the Jewish Federation of Sarasota and Manatee, Liz Alpert, the mayor of Sarasota, and Frank Alcock, a political science professor at New College.